warehouse at Oriole Park at Camden Yards. It is the MASN All Access Podcast, the first one on our new Orioles account. We have separated the two accounts, so now you know, just get the Orioles. You don't get the Nationals podcast as well. You can subscribe to both if you'd like, but you will only get Orioles podcasts here from now on. Of course, Bobby Blanco and Paul Mancano here with you. And we will be here with you all off-season as well. And the MASN All Access Podcast is brought to you by Marymount University. Visit MarymountSaints.com to learn more about our student athletes and programs today. So, separate accounts, Bobby. We have to essentially, you've been transferring all of our old podcasts to our new account so that people can go back and archive and listen to that so that they can totally unsubscribe if they like to the national side. And we have them all in one place.
Yeah, it's been a good process, I think. I think it's something that we've heard. The most common comment we get from fans is that they kind of wish they were separate. And it makes sense, you know. If you like both teams, listen to both, subscribe to both. But if you just want Orioles, or if you for the National side, you just want Nationals, there you go. That way, it kind of brought to our attention because obviously during the World Series postseason run for the Nats, we didn't really have time to do Orioles podcasts, and we kind of felt bad. All you wonderful Orioles fans who have subscribed and listened to our podcast, just getting updates week after week on Nats and no Orioles stuff. So didn't want to keep bothering you with that. They are separated. It's also funny you mentioned I'm archiving all the old episodes. One, because we need it for the RSS feed, so like I can upload it to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all that stuff. But it's kind of funny looking back at what we were talking about. Like, even the beginning of the 2018 season, we talked about how cold it was for like 3 episodes straight.
Oh, yeah.
And how it was affecting the Orioles play, and how if they just got to warmer weather, they'd be better.
It
didn't end up not being that way. But so separate accounts. Again, thank you for everyone who's listened to the original account and who stick with us on the Orioles side. And if you enjoy the Nationals content as well, they'll be there. Other stations, other outlets do separate accounts for their multiple teams that they cover. It just kind of made sense.
Yeah, and when we started this, I don't know if we just kind of said, let's start a podcast and let's start putting all of our content on there.
Yeah.
Not fully expecting the kind of subscriber base and the kind of listenership that we've gotten, which is great. So thank you guys for listening as we go along. So we have some Orioles stuff to talk about as well on this podcast. Winter meetings is, 3 weeks away at this point?
Yeah.
Out in sunny San Diego. So
good thing we'll be indoors the whole time.
We will be indoors. There is a balcony and a patio right near where we are.
Yeah.
We'll probably go out there for about 30 seconds, take a deep breath, and then go back into the hotel for it.
Shout out to Drexel for locking down that spot near get some fresh air while we're working 13-hour days in San Diego.
It is going to be fun, and it is going to be Mike Elias's second winter meetings as the Orioles GM, but the first one was spent doing completely different things than what he's doing now. Of course, it was hiring a manager and going about doing that, and we remember that they made, that the reports had broken out that they had hired Brandon Hyde. Mike Elias went and said, no, that's not true. They ended up hiring him, but there was, a lot of back and forth there as well. So now Mike Elias is going into this winter meetings looking probably more at the player side than at the coaching side. But he still has some positions to fill, not just on Brandon Hyde's coaching staff, where I'm sure he'll assist with that as well, but also they have some development and front office positions to fulfill now. And now they have added another position. We heard Mike Elias was going to be replacing a lot of the staff members that left over the past however many months, and they were going to be adding positions as well.
Yeah, it's kind of revamping, like we've said. This is going to be a process that's going to take a couple years, and it's going to take a while, but they've just added some new people in the front office, and it's tough because you don't like. And I think the Orioles caught some flack for this at the end of the season. You don't like seeing people lose their jobs, obviously, but at the same time, we're starting from scratch. We're starting over here. We're hitting the reset button. Michael Elias wants his own people he can bring in and trust and talk. And when they speak up, he can trust their value. I mean, he knew nobody here before when he first came in, so it's been a process of kind of cleaning house is the wrong phrase, but just revamping everything, getting the right people where Michael Elias wants them, and that way they can move forward and build this organization from the top to the bottom the way he envisions it. Him and Sig Mejdal and Brandon Hyde, of course, and the Angelos family. and try to get this team back on a winning track record.
Yeah, so one of the first big positions that they created, and they have hired somebody for it, was Director of Baseball Development, and they have hired Eve Rosenbaum. She's a Bethesda native. I believe the news was broken by The Athletic, by the way, and a Harvard graduate. She worked with the Astros, so she does come over from the Astros, like Sig Mejdal before her, and, of course, Mike Elias. She was the Director of International Scouting since 2017, so it is another created position that kind of has a vaguer title. I wonder if she's going to get her hand into international signings, but the way that I was kind of reading between the lines in what Rock Kabako of MASNsports.com said this morning, she is going to be more focused on building up the major league roster and developing the guys who are here, uncovering the gems like we saw them do last year, whether it be a Hans or Alberto, or a Richie Martin or one of those guys. It is going to be developing the talent that they have that is closer to the major leagues, I believe.
Yeah, again, it's almost like, you talk about creating a position for it. It's like you're making a mold. You're playing to your player's strengths. You know, like Mike Elias is playing to Eve Rosenbaum's strength, and so he's gonna create this position for her and bring her in. I'm reading up on her now. She's only 2 years older than me, which is insane.
What are you doing with your life?
And went to Walt Whitman. I'm talking to you. Walt Whitman High School in Bethesda. So local product, obviously. She's familiar with the area. She might have grown up an Orioles fan, which is pretty cool. And obviously coming from the Astros and their scouting department, they're one of the best in all of baseball and what they do. And obviously Mike Elias still has ties there. It's just going to be, you talk about coaching trees. It's just going to be another, Mike Elias is going to be picking from that Astros tree whenever he gets a chance. If he's able to offer people from that department jobs here to help be more like a forward-thinking organization like the Astros, like other teams in Major League Baseball. That's what he's going to do, and bring people in and create jobs for them so they can be best suited to help this team and bring in players, like you said, to hopefully help them win sooner rather than later.
And way back when Sig Mejdal first joined the Astros front office, they created a position for him as well that was mocked by some because of the name of it. I believe it was Director of Decision Sciences, and it turned out to be a massively important position because he created this thing called the Nerd Cave, and that is really the birth of this new analytics, not the birth per se, but the development and growth of this new analytics revolution, and they were at the forefront of this. So these new positions and new titles may get stranger than Director of Baseball Development. They may end up sounding like something we have not heard in baseball before.
Yeah.
But they have a plan and an idea behind all of this stuff, and they're trying out new things, hiring new people. It's nice to see they're, one, going with a local, and two, adding a woman to the front office as well. And she will be the highest ranking woman in the Orioles front office, which is great to see.
Yeah, and we kind of touched on that too. Like last season in the general manager search, there were a couple of females that popped up in the candidacy. If you're qualified to do the job, doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, what race, ethnicity, religion, whatever it is, you're qualified. And I'm all for hiring the smartest people out there.
Yeah.
Hire all the smart people you can. The nerd cave.
Put them all in one
I want
place.
the biggest nerd cave ever, or whatever Sig Mejdal called it, here for the Orioles, because that just means more information, more analytics, being smarter than everybody else, and advancing this team so they can win ball games.
Exactly. And now, another Harvard graduate. They add another Ivy Leaguer to that front office that we could call.
Those guys tend to be pretty smart.
You could call
and gals.
You could call the MASN Web Studio the Geek Cave, I think, if at some point.
We do geek out on a lot of The Mandalorian, Star Wars.
Mandalorian, excellent too.
I love it.
2
so
episodes
much. You know what? I got tricked because we're recording this podcast on. It's a Wednesday. I thought they were releasing new episodes every Tuesday. It's Friday, so I have to wait 3 more days, which was a very big disappointment for me yesterday. But anyways, back to baseball. Yeah,
I do want to wait.
We're the Geek Cave.
Wait, real quick. Yeah. Baby Yoda, adorable.
Well, no spoilers, but adorable.
Yeah, no, there hasn't much been spoiled yet.
I think it's been a week. It's been a week.
Yeah.
If you don't know by now, then
if you haven't seen the memes of Baby Yoda,
right? If you don't know by now, you don't care enough. So we're not spoiling enough. Just the cutest thing ever.
Oh yeah.
I don't throw this phrase out very often because I don't like it, but I couldn't even.
You couldn't even?
I couldn't even.
Yeah, I can't even either.
I need all the Baby Yoda.
Adorable. So Baby Yoda, Eve Rosenbaum, we're touching on all the important things here. Next up on the Orioles kind of news in the past week, Brian Roberts added to the Hall of Fame ballot. A little bit surprising, but of course, the ballot casts a wide net, and they choose the best of those. Brian Roberts, of course, in his season, 14 seasons total, 13 with the Orioles, final one with the Yankees, which we will not mention. Hit .276, just 97 homers in his career, 542 career RBIs, 285 stolen bases, a 30.4 baseball reference WAR, which is not terrible by any stretch. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but nice to see him getting some kind of recognition there.
He was inducted into the Orioles Hall of Fame just a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you can hear him on MASN broadcasts and the Orioles radio network throughout the season.
We've had him on MASN All Access.
We've had him on MASN All Access too. Great guest, very insightful. Knows the game. Was a great player, and I think a lot of people attribute, especially my age, their young Orioles fandom to Brian Roberts. And growing up after Cal Ripken, it was, it's like, all right, then and they were bad teams. So it's like, who do you root for? Well, you look to Brian Roberts, Melvin Mora, Miguel Tejada, those types of players, and you latch onto them. I don't think he's a baseball Hall of Famer. Definitely deserves to be in this Orioles Hall of Fame. He meant so much to this team, and he stuck with them through so many tough times. Yeah. Would have liked to see him have a couple more winning seasons under his belt here. But I think this is one of those things. Brian Roberts is one of those players that, just to be recognized as a possibility, is an honor enough. Unfortunately, I don't even think he'll get enough votes to stay on the ballot after this season, but it's still, worthy to mention and snaps for Brian Roberts because well deserved, great career, and he played for a long time, 14 seasons. That's a long time. Yeah.
And he, was with the Orioles through some lean years, like you mentioned, and was kind of, I think, in one of those. He was kind of seen a little bit as one of those like scrappier guys. Yeah, definitely. A speedster on the bases, just 5'9", 175 pounds when he was playing. So, and really does not feel like that long ago, and really wasn't that long ago when he retired. His last season was in 2014. So, good to see him getting that kind of recognition. But he is the lone Orioles member on the ballot this year, and I think odds are it will probably be his last on the ballot.
Yeah, but again, still just a tremendous accomplishment in of itself. Like you read his stat line, nothing really sticks out to you, but just a solid career throughout, and deserves recognition for that.
Yeah, exactly. He did have 50 stolen bases back in 2007 when he was an All-Star. That was pretty impressive.
I think, what other years was he an All-Star?
2007 and 2005.
I think it was 5. One of my fondest memories was when the Orioles had this entire starting infield for the All-Star game.
That's right, yeah.
With Tejada, Mora, and Roberts. That was really fun.
Yeah, he hit .314 that year, a 900 OPS, which is pretty impressive. 18 home runs, 73 RBIs, 27 stolen bases. That was a good year. Yeah. For Brian Roberts.
Solid player.
Yeah, solid player indeed.
Fan favorite, and I know we get a lot of comments. Fans love him on the broadcast too, on our broadcasts and on listening on the radio. So he's just a good baseball guy and good person to have around your organization.
Exactly. All right, so let's turn to the future now because the Orioles have added to their roster as expected. Tonight is the deadline to get their rosters up to 40 if they would so choose. At this point, they are sitting at 39. They added the players that we kind of expected. And before we get into that, preface kind of the idea of why they do this again is because they have this deadline of guys that they want to protect for the Rule 5 draft, which comes on the last day of winter meetings. And essentially anybody who has accrued enough service time, which I believe is five years, in the same organization is eligible for the Rule 5 draft. So by putting them on the 40-man roster, they are protecting them from being taken by other organizations in that Rule 5 draft. And the guys that they added make a whole lot of sense.
Yep.
4 guys, Ryan Mountcastle, Keegan Aiken, Dean Kramer, and Ryan McKenna. 4 guys that had pretty good, all of them really had good seasons in the minor leagues and have a lot of promise ahead of them, just have not been able to reach the major leagues yet, but that could change, I think, for all 4 of those guys in 2020.
Yeah, and Ryan Mountcastle right here is the cream of the crop. He's the big name on this list. Obviously, at the Orioles minor league player of the year. He was the International League MVP. A fantastic season. There was no way the Orioles were going to let any other team get dibs on him. We expect him he could possibly break the opening day roster next year. He's a corner piece or a chip that Michael Elias wants to see develop into a mainstay on this team. He's someone to build around, hopefully for the future, even though we talk about all the time that he's a guy that Michael Elias inherited, not his own picking, but he has shown enough where he deserves to stay. He can be hopefully a really good Major League Baseball player down the line, and that is coming sooner rather than later, probably, for Ryan Mountcastle.
Yeah, he hit 312 this year with 25 homers, 83 RBIs. And I was impressed when he came up to Camden Yards in the last homestand of the season when they gave out those minor league awards. Just a very impressive guy, just the way that he carries himself. And, obviously the one knock on him is his defense, and they wanted to see him improve that. They tried him in a couple different defensive positions last season, tried him in the outfield a little bit, tried him at first base. So he could be at several different positions. The good news is they have the time to develop him. Doesn't need to come in right away. He might crack the open day roster. He might be called up midseason, but he will have time to develop his defense, get better in that area. And clearly, offensively, I think he has enough right now to prove that he is ready for the major leagues.
And that's something we've already said about him, that his bat plays. And Steve Molesky, who we've had on the podcast a couple of times, has been adamant about this. Like, his bat can play. It's just a matter of getting his defense up to snuff so that he can play every day in the major leagues. He's a guy, he's only 22. Mm-hmm. He's a guy that obviously the Orioles don't want to rush him. There's no need, and this is also why we didn't see him get called up in September this past season. There's no need to bring him up if he's not going to play.
Yeah.
So they want to wait until he's ready to be an everyday major leaguer, can play every day, and then he'll be up on the major league roster and hopefully performing and showing that he has improved defensively and deserves to be up here.
Exactly. All right, next up on the list, Keegan Aiken, oldest guy on this list. He's 24 years old. Had a little bit of a disappointing season last year. 6-7 record and a 4.73 ERA, but 10.5 strikeouts per nine, which is a high number. In his first year with the Norfolk Tides, Aiken had an outstanding 2018. He's doesn't have exactly what you might expect from a frontline starter in terms of his size and his stuff. He doesn't have a blistering fastball by any stretch. He's just a solid pitcher. The 4.73 ERA this year, I think, kind of shows that he was adjusting to that level of play. You hope you'll see a little bit lower of an ERA in 2020. But I think scouts are still kind of high on the, he may never be a frontline starter by any stretch. He may never be a starter, but I could see him being maybe a fourth or fifth starter in a rotation, maybe even a third, eventually when he gets called up.
Yeah, we've talked about the pitching depth in this organization. That's been something that they've struggled for the past couple of years. Now they have some top talents, and Keegan Aiken definitely falls in that category. Rakabako mentions in his article that, his 61 walks were a reason why we didn't see him last year, but we'll probably end up seeing him at some point next summer.
Yeah.
If he can kind of get his command down, limit the walks. I don't know how his velocity plays up here yet, but you mentioned he's 24. You said
24.
So that could come with age and obviously development. It's just to me with all these pitchers for the Orioles, it's we kind of need to see where they're at. Like for Mountcastle, we talked about there's no rush for Mountcastle, but for these pitchers, we talked about in our end of season podcast. Outside of John Means, who do the Orioles and Dylan Bundy, I guess, but who do the Orioles really have that they can count on?
Right.
They need to see what they have in terms of this minor league system. And so they know, should we go trade for other pitching prospects? Should we emphasize pitching in the draft coming up? Whatever that may be. So yeah, it's they don't want they like what they have in Aiken, but they're also waiting for him to take maybe that next step to be available for the big league roster.
And considering the enormous steps we saw taken by other Orioles pitching prospects, it's less important kind of that he develops into a great pitcher or an above-average major league pitcher because they have guys waiting in the wings named D.L. Hall and Grayson Rodriguez.
Yeah.
And they have another guy in Dean Kramer who is waiting in the wings as well, 23 years old. He bounced around this year. Of course, he was in spring training camp with the Orioles, had an oblique injury, I believe, at that point. Spent a little bit of time with Frederick, but mostly between Bowie and Norfolk. Had his best statistics when he was in Bowie. Struggled a little bit in his first action of AAA, but overall in the season, 9-6 record, a 3.72 ERA, and 9.7 strikeouts per 9. Norfolk only made those 4 starts, but he had an 8.84 ERAs where he struggled. But he did get some action in the Arizona Fall League.
Yeah.
Had a 2.37 ERA in 6 games there. So I think one of the guys who was brought back in the midseason trades last year in 2018, and somebody who still has a very high ceiling in Dean Kramer.
Yeah, he was involved. He was a piece in that Manny Machado deal with the Dodgers. So the Orioles book on him isn't as long as some of these other guys. So he's definitely shown some prospect. The fact that he was able to, they felt that they could give him a shot at AAA is promising. He obviously didn't succeed very well, as you mentioned, but he made it there, and then the fact that he also bounced back in the Arizona Fall League and put up some solid numbers, however brief that league and that time you spend in Arizona is.
Yeah.
So, again, it's they're kind of waiting to see what they have in him. A shorter book. He's only been here for a year and a half. And you mentioned the other prospects they have. They're really trying to figure out this pitching depth that they have because, again, I really feel like this is something that this organization has lacked for a long time now, and they're going to try. I believe Michael Elias is going to start valuing younger pitching more than we've ever seen in this team. So he wants to protect him, knows he has good stuff, but can he also make that leap as well? That's what they're going to be looking for next season for some of these young guys.
I'm also interested to see how many of these guys maybe not break camp with the team, but get the invite to spring training.
Yeah.
Because we could see it could be an exciting spring in terms of Sarasota guys that we're never gonna, we've never seen at this level before.
Yeah, and it's also a kind of a two-way street too, because the minor league camp is just down the road in Sarasota, and we've seen guys come that way too. Start in minor league and then get the call up to come over to the major league camp for a game and see what we have.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's out of necessity, but sometimes it's because they deserve it. So just because they don't get that invite, or just because they're not with the major league club, or even other guys we're not going to talk about today who didn't make the 40-man roster, being protected from the Rule 5 draft, doesn't mean that they can't show promise when spring training starts in a couple months.
Yeah, and I remember last year with remember how great Yasniel Diaz looked in spring training camp, and Orioles fans get a taste of what could come down the line as well. All right, the fourth guy that they added is Ryan McKenna, who did not have an outstanding year at the plate, hit .232. 321 on base percentage, just 9 home runs. Never been known for his pop. Of course, played with Double-A Bowie, but we got to see him a little bit in the playoffs as well. And the speed really returned for Ryan McKenna, a guy who can play pretty much all 3 outfield positions when called upon. But could we know we have Austin Hayes now at the big league level in center field, but McKenna has shown the speed to play center field. But in his minor league career, he had 20 stolen bases in 2017. That number dropped all the way down to 9 in 2018. And then this year, 25 stolen bases. So it went up, and he showed that speed that can help make up for the fact that he does not have a ton of power.
Yeah. Every time we went to Bowie a couple of times this season, and every time we went down there, it seemed like Buck Britton was just raving about McKenna. Even though he kept saying, the numbers don't show it. He's a good ball player,
right? And
he's having a solid season. The 25 stolen bases obviously is a big number that stand out. It was sometimes just a matter of him getting on base. He had also got, I think, 26 doubles too. So getting on base, he can do some damage. And then Rakubako in his article mentions that a scout from outside the Orioles organization, so meaning that other teams are looking at him, reference that he can play a big league center field. So probably is smart that they added him to the 40-man roster, because it looks like he was drawing some attention. He wasn't going to slip underneath the radar. So Orioles were smart to lock him up too, or I guess protect him from this Rule 5 draft, because he is a guy that, they seem to, everyone we talk to throughout the organization seems to rave about Ryan McKenna.
Yeah.
Even though the numbers aren't there, he said, it'll come. And the fact that he was able to play, what did he play? He played 135 games with Bowie. He's a solid player, someone they can rely on. And we know how well Buck Britton is respected in this organization, how much his voice is valued. So the fact that he's got him in his corner, Brian McKenna could have a bright future for the O's.
Yep. So it is Mountcastle, Aiken, Kramer, and McKenna. And we will have Dean Kramer on MASN All Access, FaceTiming in tomorrow afternoon.
Yeah.
As he gets the news that he's been called up to at least added to the 40-man roster. And, of course, it is a 40-man roster, but they have 39 at this point because the Orioles will likely be making a pick, almost definitely be making a pick in the Rule 5 draft. They hold the second overall pick in that Rule 5 draft. It's the same pick, obviously, that they will have in the June draft. But now that these teams, tonight being the deadline, now that these teams are starting to solidify their 40-man rosters around the league, we will be able to have a good idea of who the Orioles might take and who the candidates are for that second Rule 5 pick.
Yeah, it's funny because we're always, for the Rule 5 draft, I feel like we're always preparing for looking at who the Orioles are going to take as opposed to protect. And now we're obviously way more focused on them, who they're going to protect than they're going to take. There's only one spot available. That could obviously change in terms of non-tender contracts, trade, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Before the winter meetings in the Rule 5 draft on the December 12th, I believe it is. But yeah, so it's kind of funny talking about guys that protect. The Orioles have prospects that are valued outside of the organization and throughout baseball. So they need, and Michael Ass wants to hold on to them guys. He's a believer in building the farm system and having a strong minor league system throughout. And so these are the probably four of the biggest names that the Orioles have in that system in terms of their prospect list. And he's not going to let them walk out the door for nothing. And hopefully they're becoming pieces that impact the Major League roster, not just this year, but in a couple years to come as well.
We saw Richie Martin Jr. got taken in the Rule 5 draft, of course, number 1 overall by the Orioles. They took Drew Jackson, or at least traded for Drew Jackson, I believe. The Phillies had the rights and then traded for him immediately.
Good memory.
And Drew Jackson did not stick around with the team. They eventually sold him back for half the price. Of course, it's $100,000 is the original, and then you could sell him back for $50,000, I believe. So with the roster being at 39, they can still change. They can still drop guys off that if they decide to, and say they want to go after 2 guys maybe in the Rule 5 draft, like they did last year. But this at least gives them the option to make an addition if they would like.
Yeah, and I expect them to. This is something, and Mike Elias. I guess the only negative is that you have to keep him on the 40-man, the Major League roster throughout the whole season. But it's basically just you're able to take free prospects. So I don't think Michael Elias, they'll do the diligence, and I'm so interested. I don't know how Steve Melesky does it. How do you scour throughout the Major League, all their teams and all their minor league systems, and try to narrow down players that they could possibly take? I mean,
it's tough.
Yeah, he's got to talk to a lot of the Baseball America guys. Obviously, MLBpipeline.com probably have a better idea. So keep an eye on Steve's blog, because I'm sure that'll be coming within the next couple of weeks leading up to the winter meetings. But yeah, that spot's going to be open. Orioles take someone every year. It's a good ending to the winter meeting. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach that. And now we know who they protected. And also, Rock also mentions the people that players that they've elected to keep off the 40-man roster heading into the 2 big names being Cody Sedlock and I just had it right here, Gray Fenter, who ended up having a pretty solid season at Delmarva.
Yeah.
But Cody Sedlock is probably a big name that Orioles fans will recognize that is off the 40-man roster and is available in the Rule 5 draft. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
A guy who is a former first-round pick. Yeah. And struggled with injuries a little bit throughout his career. Gray Fenter, I understand he pitched in that one of the Delmarva playoff games. I think he has the potential eventually to maybe make his way up, but the fact that he was with Delmarva for the season means it would be a heck of a jump for him to make it all the way up to a major league team.
That'd be a big risk to draft him in the Rule 5 draft and then having to have him on the roster in the major league roster for a full season.
So the Orioles are gambling there and hoping that nobody takes those 2 guys, because I'm sure they want to hold on to as many guys as possible.
Stop talking about him, Bosch.
Oh yeah, you got to
don't bring attention to it.
Exactly, so that the Steve Meleskys of the world won't other teams won't find out who they have. Yeah. So of course we will have coverage from winter meetings and from the Rule 5 draft. December 12th, is that the date?
Yeah, the Thursday of the winter meetings, December 12th, is the date. Early in the morning, which will actually be more midday East Coast time, because it'll be like around 8 or 9 o'clock in San Diego.
That's like 2 weeks away.
It is. It's almost exactly 3 weeks away. 3 weeks from tomorrow.
3 weeks. Okay.
Yeah, because next week is Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
The week after that is the first week of December, and then we leave that Saturday, and then the Rule 5 draft is in 3 weeks from tomorrow.
Can we just cocoon ourselves from now until then, go into hibernation, so we don't have to, we can just sleep, save our rest.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to. I mean, if we never really the offseason's short enough, and then obviously working the World Series that made it shorter. I'm really looking forward to this Thanksgiving break.
Yeah,
just kind of take like a longer. Not a full week, and just relax. Because then, like I said, right back, we have a week to prepare for the winter meetings, then we're off.
I can't wait to be sitting down at Thanksgiving dinner, and we've just said our prayer, and then I check my phone, and the Orioles have made a big trade.
Oh, so please no.
Can't wait for that. Of course, you can follow us on our new platform. Thank you for subscribing here, we hope. The MASN All Access Podcast, Orioles edition. You can listen to us on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Play. Watch us on the MASN All Access Facebook page. Watch us on MASN Orioles YouTube account. And, of course, give Bobby a follow at Bobby_Blanco. Give me a follow at Paul Mancano and at MASN Orioles on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, wherever you can get it. The MASN All Access Podcast is brought to you by Marymount University. Visit MarymountSaints.com to learn more about our student athletes and programs today. For Bobby, I'm Paul. We'll see you later.